Hello artists, hope you're doing well. We're going to start on our 2-point perspective treehouse this week. When you were in 5th grade, if you had me, we created a 1-point perspective bedroom. And if you'll recall, that meant that there was 1 point in the middle of the room where everything else was measured from. So 2-point perspective is the same idea, except that the points, the perspective points, are running off the page. And I'll explain that more in a minute. What we're going to do is together create some sort of tree and the 2 boxes that you see here. I just wanted to show you some examples of houses that have been done over the years just so you get an idea of really how different they all are. You can see that the boxes are present in all of these. There's a tree, but each one is really unique, and yours will be too. My hope is just that I teach you a technique and then you can apply your wonderful creativity to it. So for this project, all you need is a piece of white paper, and that can just be copy paper. You need a ruler, a pencil, an eraser. It could be a pencil with an eraser or an eraser, and you need a piece of paper, a strip that looks like this, that is wider than your piece of copy paper. We're going to actually tape this to your paper like this. So if you don't have a longer piece of paper, which might be the case, you can tape a couple of pieces together. But this is basically, I call it your wing. And you're going to tape it to the back like this, roughly in the middle. You do not have to measure it. That becomes your back. And when you flip it over, you now have those 2 edges on the side. And those are very important because that's where you're going to put your perspective points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the steps. I'm going to talk about them as I do them. And that way, if you need to kind of go back or pause the video to catch up, you can do that. So let's get started. The first thing you need to do is once you have your wings, you're going to create 2 perspective points. Again, roughly in the middle. So I'm going to put one here, and they're literally dots, and one over here. So I have 2 dots on both sides. This wing stays on your paper until you are completely done, until you're done with all of your details, all of your lines at the very end before you add color, because you need those for all of your measurements. The other reminder I want to give you is that just like any drawing that we do, but especially perspective drawing, these lines need to be light. Now, one challenge about these videos is that if I do light pencil on my paper, you can't see it in the video. So my lines are really going to be darker than they should be so that you can see it. Your lines should be very, very light because you will erase. Just like with the bedroom, there are for sure lines that you do that will be erased during your drawing process. So let's get started. First thing we're going to do is create the trunk of the tree, and that's a very simple, just a vertical line. So I'm going to go almost to the top, not quite, about maybe a third of the way down, and I'm just going to do a straight line that runs down. Again, that line that I just drew is much darker than it should be, but you won't be able to see it if I don't do that. So a line like that. Going to do another one that's parallel because I'm going to make it look like a trunk. Now, one of the reasons you want your lines to be lighter than mine is that when you go back and add the details, you may decide that your tree trunk, you don't want it this straight. Maybe you want it skinnier, you want it wider. You need to have your lines light so that you can erase it and change it. It's still going to be a rectangle, but you might change it somewhat. So remember to keep that light. All right, we're ready to do our box, our first box. And the way that we do that is we're going to do a line that is vertical and parallel to this line. It's not going to go off right way from the top or from the bottom. It's just going to be next to it. So I'll show you what I mean. It's going to look like that. One tip I want to give you, and this is really important, you will notice that the bottom of this line is above, I'm going to show you like this. It is above where my perspective dots are. You will want to do that for this project because it will make one of the steps we do later a little bit easier. It's just a little secret tip I'm giving you. So again, you're drawing that line with a ruler, and the bottom should be above where that dot is. So it looks just like this. Now we're ready for perspective lines. So just like in the bedroom, any line that is not vertical, so if it's going off to the sides, you need to line it up with a dot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line my ruler up with the top of my line and the dot, and I'm going to draw a line. Now I don't need this line to go all the way down. I'm going to stop right about there because this is a box, and so my line would probably not go all the way there. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the side over here. So I'm going to go from the top, down, from the bottom, lining it up with that perspective dot and over. Now you can kind of already see that we've got a box. We need to close it off. So I'm going to use my ruler and I'm going to close off the side. A reminder about this. This is something I am often guilty of when I'm doing perspective drawing. I'll use my ruler so I've got it straight, but I'll do it, say, just at a tiny bit of an angle, not on purpose, but on accident. And so when I do my line, it is no longer parallel to the side of the paper. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that line is very vertical, that the line is perfectly parallel to the side, because that will give you the best illusion of this 2-point perspective of the lines receding back into the background. So I'm going to do that same technique on both sides. I'm closing my box, and you can close it however you wish. If you want your box to be smaller than mine, that's fine. At this point, I need to erase lines that I don't need, and now you'll see why it's super important that you've done light lines. My lines are going to be tough to erase because I did them dark, but that's okay. Oh, not too bad. We're doing okay. So I don't need those inside lines. That's the tree. And if I were doing this, if I were building a real tree house, I wouldn't see those. I'm going to erase any excess that I have. So now I have this box and I have a tree. I'm going to make my tree go up a little bit. That's going to be running through it. The next thing we need to create is a bottom for this box, because we want to make it look like if somebody were really climbing into this treehouse, how would they get into it? And the way that we do that is we start at this corner, we put our ruler on that corner, and then I'm going to line it up with the dot that's opposite it. So here's what I mean by that. My corner here, my dot here, and I'm just going to do a line. Lift that up so you can see. And now I'm going to do the opposite. So the opposite corner, and the dot. And again, if this sounds confusing, pause it, go back on the video and try it again, because once you do it a couple of times, you'll see. So this I'm going to erase. I don't need this, but you can see how this looks like. Let me erase that. If I were climbing up this tree, that is the entrance to, or I should say one of my entrances. I might have multiple entrances to my treehouse. Okay, so there's one box. We're going to move on to the second box. The second box is exactly the same technique. The only tricky part of it is that it is overlapping this box, and so you have to kind of pay attention to your lines. So I'm going to go right into my box, and again, you can do this wherever you want. I kind of recommend keeping it towards the edge, like maybe not doing it all the way over here, but over here, because then you retain some of this box. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to do a vertical line just like I did before. I'm going to make it go a little lower. This time, I don't have to worry about this bottom line being above it. I can make it go below because I'm not going to put a bottom on this one. But I am going to do that same technique where I go to the bottom of the line, I measure it with the dot, I go to the top of the line, measure it with the dot, go over here, do the same thing on both sides, and you can probably see in your drawing how you are creating another box. Now I have to put the sides on these again, and just like we said before, we want these to be very straight, very parallel to the sides of the paper. There's that, and there's that. Then the next part of it is just about erasing, but sometimes I have to pause for a second. Even though I've done this so many times, I have to pause and sort of look at, okay, what lines do I not need? Well, if I were looking at this, this is the square I'd be seeing, so I don't really need this. This needs to be erased. And on this side, I'd be seeing this box, so I need to erase this part. And I know we just put that bottom in, but that's okay because I'm still seeing the bottom over here, which is realistic. That's what I would be seeing. So there's my second box, okay? The next step is that we're actually going to put a roof on this box, which is one of my favorite parts because it's a really cool technique. Because this is 2-point perspective, the illusion is that this box is going back into the background, right? It's receding. So when we want to find a center point, that's difficult to do because we have these angles and because it's larger here and smaller here. So here's the trick for finding the center. You're going to make an extremely light X. So I'm going to go from one corner to the other and one corner to the other. This X will for sure be erased, so really make sure it's light. Just like that. Now, the X, the middle of it, that is my center point of that square. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay my ruler right in the middle because that's my center point. And that is where I'm going to create the pitch of my roof. So my center's there. I'm going to draw a line straight up, and I want the pitch to go pretty high because I want it to be roof-like. So I made that go all the way up there, and then I'm going to create my triangle. So I'm going to measure that down. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And you can adjust accordingly, you know, if you want it to be taller or shorter, that's fine. I will tell you that this next part we're going to do, which is to create this part of the roof, if you are having trouble with this next part, it might be because your roof wasn't tall enough. I'll show you what I mean. I want to create the dimensional part of this roof. So the way I do that is I line the top of my roof up with the dot over here. So I've got my ruler on my dot, I have the top of my roof, and I'm going to make a line. And then, this part's really tricky and cool, I'm just gonna lay my ruler, I'm laying it so that it's right on this line, and all I'm gonna do, friends, is I'm dragging it backwards, keeping it on that angle. Let me show you that again. I'm keeping it that same angle, drag it back, and when I get to the end of my house, that is where I make my line. Now I need to erase what I don't need. I don't need this, I don't need this, I don't need my X, but now I have a roof. So what I was saying before is that if when you do this, let's say I had stopped my roof, let's say I'd made this line like right there, and I tried to measure the roof from there. If I did that, making this would have been really difficult. And so if when you do that, you're like, well, why isn't it reaching? Pause for a second, make that line go up a little higher and make the roof taller, and then it will work. That's always the problem, is that it's too short, and that will be your dilemma. The next thing I want to show you is how to do a rope or a ladder that allows you to climb up into your treehouse. And you don't have to do this, but you need to have some way to get up into it. So this is just one technique. For this, you want to measure a line that hangs off of your box on this side. And we're going to do it on this side because this one doesn't have an opening. So the first tip I want to give you is that you want the line to be far enough away from this side that you could create two lines. You're eventually going to have something that looks like this. If you start your first line here, then your ladder is going to go off the box. So don't make that mistake. So your first line should be sort of close to the tree. And I'm just going to make a straight line. And what I'm going to do then, so it looks just like that, is I'm going to measure off every ½ inch on my ruler. And what I mean by that is I'm just going to put a little tick mark. So ½ inch, inch, ½ inch, inch, ½ inch, every ½ inch. I'm just making marks, so it looks like that, okay? What I'm going to do next is I'm going to erase every other section. So this first section I'm keeping as a pencil line. The second section I'm erasing. The next one I keep. The second one I erase. And I just keep going down so that what I end up with is a line and an empty space every other block. And what I'm creating are the steps. So now that I have my steps, I'm going to line my ruler up. I'm going to line it to the dot. I'm going to line it to my first step, and I'm going to do that line to the perspective dot. And what happens is, because you have it every other one, each step is a little bit different of an angle, and that means you're doing it right, because when we're done, it should look like the wood, I'm going to call them pieces of wood because it's like a ladder, but the pieces of wood are receding into the background. You can already see how mine looks like it's angling back. And that's what we want it to look like. So if you feel like, well, wait a minute, each angle is different, that's correct. It's going to progressively change. So I'm going to go all the way down. You can do yours as tall or short as you want. Just remember that you have to decide how your people are getting into your clubhouse or your tree house. I'm going to go on this side, and this needs some sort of chain or rope. I'm just going to put it down so I can block it off. I'm going to erase this. And then one little trick you can do, a cool way to make a chain, I'm going to do it large on this so you can see it. You can do it very small, but a chain you can just make by doing a C, a backward C, and then an oval in it. C, backward C, and then an oval. And when you do that all the way down here, small, right? it ends up looking like a chain. That's just one technique. Again, you don't need to do that, but it's one thing you could do. You could also do it as a rope. You could do whatever you want. If you want this wood to make to look dimensional on this side, you're going to go over to this side of the wood and this dot, and you can put a little line that's lining up with this dot and this line on this dot, because a piece of wood like a 2x4, it has a dimensional side too, right? So you want it to have that extra side. But yours might not be wood, so that's why I say might. Maybe you're creating something else. It's up to you what you want to do with that. The other things I want to tell you, windows and doors. Same as in our bedrooms, the things that are not vertical have to go on this perspective dot. So let's say I wanted to put a door here. The door on this side is going to line up with this dot, so I would just do a door, and I would do vertical lines straight down. Again, really parallel with the side of my paper. Same for windows. Let's say I want to do a window over here. I'm going to line up with this side, and I'm going to do the bottom and the top, both lined up with the dot. Now, if you get stuck on which direction goes which way, this is how I like to think of it. This angle, it looks like it's an angle, and I feel like it's pointing this direction. So this square is going to go here, and this one, this rectangle really, is pointing to this side. So this goes to this dot. On this square, this is pointing that way, and this is pointing that way. You have to be sure you're putting it to the right dot. You can, when you're creating this, do another box if you want. If you did another box, it would be the exact same technique where you're creating a vertical line and then going off to both sides. It's the same steps over and over. If you wanted to create something like wood, like maybe your box was made of wood slats, you would do that on the perspective dot too. I'm just lining it up like that. Maybe you want to do this, and maybe you want to pretend that you have, when you are building something and you are pounding the nails in, sometimes you can put the little like that so they look like nails. That's one little fun thing. But you could think about, what are you going to put in your windows? Are there going to be curtains? Are you going to be able to see inside that window or not? Could there be lights in your tree house? Is there a door handle? Is there some sort of decoration on here? You also need to decide where your tree house is. Is it in the forest? Is it at the beach? Is it in your backyard? What's down here? You have to decide what's down here, because that will determine how you're going to get into your treehouse. If this is your backyard and you have grass, this is probably okay because it's the right height. But maybe your treehouse is super duper tall and you're seeing it from afar, and back in the background, it's like maybe there's a lake or something in the background, and you need maybe rocks on your tree or pieces of wood. You've maybe seen this before, where sometimes people will tack pieces of wood onto the tree so that you could climb up it. You need to decide what habitat your tree is in. And in the examples I show you, you could see how they were all completely different. Not only were the habitats different, but the details within the habitats were different. So let's just do a quick, now that you've seen the directions, that might make a little more sense. This one is got the bark of the tree. They did a really nice job of creating that bark. One of the things you can think about is how you want to create the color. Again, we all have different supplies, so this is definitely a project. Whatever you have will work great. If you have colored pencils, great. If you have watercolors, great. Markers, whatever you have. But you can use more than one medium. A lot of these used multiple mediums. Some of them just use one, so it's up to you. But you can use them the best texture, the best details, deciding how you're going to use those. So I cannot wait to see what you do with this. It's a really great opportunity to learn a technique, at the same time just using your total creativity for it. If you have any questions, please feel free to send me a note. I hope you enjoy doing it. Talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.